So Amy and Anne-Marie, most of the students taking this class are probably in their first year, their second semester of college life. At this point, how much should they be thinking about things like career or vocation? What would be maybe some appropriate first steps as they look beyond even college life?
I will jump in on this one because I have very strong feelings about vocation and career. I think students should be thinking about their vocation, but I think vocation is different from career, and I know that's something we might talk about a little bit more later. But, you know, we are at a Christian institution, and not everybody who comes here is Christian. But so in the sort of Christian setting, vocation is a calling, and for me, that's what God is calling you to do. And I think a liberal arts Christian education is the best place to explore what it is that God is calling you to do, because you actually have the opportunity to take a lot of different kinds of courses, including those in science. You came here thinking you were going to be a history major, and it turns out you love biology because you had to take this course. Is that God speaking to you? Is that God asking you to think about maybe your gift is here, maybe there's a calling there? So I think they should be thinking about their calling always, but I don't think they should be worried about what am I going to do to make a living after college, because I think that will come later.
And I think that is, I mean, I really like what you said, because I think that it's the idea of not answering the question of what am I supposed to do, but who am I supposed to be?
Yeah.
Which is something that we talk about a lot here at Bethel, I think. And so something that I feel like that we have worked on as a department in the last few years, and that I feel like we are getting better and better at it, is helping students be equipped to, again, not think specifically about what are you going to do, but rather who are you, what skills do you have, and how do we create sort of a seamlessness for you between hard skills and who you are, and that who you are contributes to those hard skills, and those hard skills help develop who you are as a person. So I think that that's something that's particularly important to think about, because I think that the more consciously you are thinking about that, then the better you're going to be at articulating that, whether it's to, you know, family and friends who say, what are you doing with a history major, or whether it is when you're looking at internships or future employers, that we're just as interested in who you are becoming, and that's directly tied, it's not independent from the actual skills that you're obtaining.
Well, let's talk about calling. We can come back to career maybe more specifically later on. I mean, I love what you're saying. I also know it's hard to hear the calling.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, one thing I talk with first year students, you're surrounded by voices, right?
Yes.
And not all of those are voices you ought to be listening to.
No.
And some that you shouldn't be listening to might be parents saying, here's what you ought to do with your life.
Yeah.
It might be pastors. It might be me, right? I might not actually know you. And you might not know you.
Right.
So, I mean, either maybe from your own personal experience, I don't know if you feel like you've got a kind of a call or moments of call, or like what advice do you have for students of how do you filter out the other voices and listen for the one that actually is doing that calling in their life?
I would say, you know, one thing that I've seen from students is they are reluctant to try lots of different kinds of things because they're concerned about failing. To me, failing gives you indications about what maybe you ought not to do, or how badly do you want it. Is that then an indication? Kevin Craig, a former history professor here, once told me that, you know, God sometimes calls you to what you love. And sometimes experiencing something and having great passion for it is an indication that you need to pursue that. And then maybe the door gets closed later on, but at least you have been faithful in pursuing it and responding to that. I think it also helps you be more creative about what you think about doing and applying for. And so as you're looking for classes and internships, okay, that doesn't seem to fit maybe with your history major, but, you know, is there a way in which working for the Twins organization, because you have such a love for this, does actually tie back into it in some way?
No, I agree with that 100%. I think that, one, on the first thing that you said, just about not having a fear of failure, and the idea that you have to try for things and trying for things and building, part of building virtue and building integrity is trying for things that you don't just know you're going to get.
Right.
It's shooting higher, and it's just going through that experience.
And it will hurt to fail.
It will hurt, and I think that that's something that our culture has lost a little bit of that value of the value of failure and of having to make new plans. And I think what that teaches you then is kind of goes to your other idea about the fact that calling isn't one specific thing. And I think, again, we have to kind of take the time to do the hard work of saying, when you're called, we're not saying that you're called to one particular job.
Right.
Maybe you will be. I don't know. But calling is something that's about, if you were to look at the 7 different things you're interested in, can you find a common denominator between them?
Right.
And so I think that that's one of the things, again, about our department that is great, is that, well, everyone feels compelled and is gifted in particular different areas related to the academic work they're doing. I think everyone actually feels very called to be a teacher. Yeah. And it may not be teaching specifically, like it has to be at this level, but it's that idea of what happens when we're teaching and working with others. And so to kind of help students think about, again, like what's the common denominator when you look at all of the different types of things that you enjoy, because we are very hyper focused on one career, one path, and that's not, I think we want you to confidently think differently than that.
So we've talked some about vocation and calling. I do want to come back to career, because I hear everything you're saying.
Practical.
I also know students, or at least their parents, are concerned. And I feel like I always struggle, right? Because my answer to what do you do with a history major is you can do anything with a history major, because of all the things you had just said, because we equip you with all these skills. At the same time, it's nice to tell at least stories of here's some kind of unexpected, out-of-the-box things history majors have. Do you have a favorite story? Maybe it's your own story, maybe it's a relative, maybe it's a former student you've had. What's your favorite, like, kind of surprising history major who went? It might even be a kind of predictable career like teaching, but it took a different form or something like that.
Yeah, I guess I can think of one of my closest friends who was a history major at the same time that I was here at Bethel, who did sort of start in a traditional path and started by being a teacher and was a middle school teacher and then a high school teacher, and then found that she was really interested in kind of both the academic and personal counseling sides of what she saw at school, and went on to get her degree in school counseling, and totally felt like being a history major helped her thrive in that context, not only just sort of the skills needed for graduate school, but also her way of thinking holistically and historically about the various sort of issues and things that she was studying, and to understand even things like educational trends, and to sort of see what the trajectory has been over time, and then now has transitioned into working for the State Department. So here she is on career 3. They've all been really good careers, and each one has sort of built on the one prior to it, but the thing linking them together, she would articulate, I think, is the skills that she gained as a history major. And I think that even now, she doesn't necessarily know that that's where she's going to be in 10 years. She has all kinds of options, but they're really all related to her skill set. But she still totally embraces and sees herself as a history major and talks about all of her jobs sort of coming out of that.
I think, too, of Lauren Peffley, who is a graduate of Bethel University, and she was a history major, and I don't know if she had another major or minor, but she ended up working for International Justice Mission after graduating, and now she's pursuing a graduate degree in social work. And I think it was really helpful for her in her work with human trafficking to have that historical background, and then, of course, as she's going into graduate school, having those research skills and things like that. But I think she wants to be someone who's not just an activist at the ground level. She wants to be doing policy changes. And I think, that has been really helpful then to have that academic background as she moves from working at the ground level into then higher level, big change kinds of things.
I think it's really important to put an S on career. I mean, it's actually important. It's so rare that you're going to have like a 40-year career that's not, you're going to change, the field is going to change, technology is going to change, the needs of whoever you're serving is going to change. And so I hear this a lot. It might not be 3 careers, it might be 2, or it might be a shift, but like history majors feel like they've learned how to learn. So they can go back to graduate school. Maybe Lauren didn't think about social work, but she had this, Buechner talks about, deep gladness being a calling. It makes you, it's a love, it's a passion, but also the world's deepest need is a calling too. And maybe she had that sense of need.
Yeah, she did.
And thought, well, I didn't think of this when I was 19, but now that I'm 22 or 23, social work can do this. And she was set up for grad school. One of my favorite stories is Kim Pagelo, who was probably like 3 years before Lauren. Did her senior STEM project in like Russian history in the 1930s, and then decided to go back and become a nurse. And did this really, had to do all the kind of intro level science coursework. Went back, she's a public health nurse, I think. And we talked to her about it, and there's this kind of sense, well, nurses do history. You've got to interview people and pick out data that fits and explains and discern patterns. But it's also just that she was ready, she was equipped to go back and read a lot and master a lot of material. And so that's an advantage too, is your career might change, But
I think one of the interesting things about being a history major is that it's risky in the sense that you, the study of history means that you're always opening yourself up to being compelled by something that you're not going to be able to stop thinking about. And that may, lead you into doing something different than you had originally planned. Or again, it's planting some seed, thinking about Lauren's work of something that you just cannot let go of. And back to your idea of suffering, it's sort of that idea that historians develop this empathy through being exposed to some really awful stuff, but yet that also, then you can't ignore it, and then you're responsible for it. And that might lead you in a different direction, whatever sort of responsibility that you feel for it. So it actually brings a tremendous amount of vulnerability, I think, to study history, because you realize you may stumble upon something that then is going to move your life in a different direction.
Yeah, I don't want to spiritualize these choices too much, but I think there is a degree that majoring in something like history requires some faith, certainly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, if I do this, I will be then in control of my life. It's a kind of yieldedness, right? To say, first of all, that I'm much smaller. If you study history, one thing you should take away is that, individuals are very important, but they're also affected by forces well beyond their control and structures. And I think you learn that. And you might kind of push back against that sense that I've got my life mapped out.
Right.
And when I'm 18, I know exactly the things I've got to jump through in order to get that salary and that office and that kind of lifestyle. And so I would hope that, if nothing else, makes you a little bit more comfortable with the vicissitudes, right? All the turns you don't expect.
Right. Well, and I think that it may be a very, I think it's kind of a comforting thing when you stumble upon something and you realize, I care about this even if no one else thinks this is interesting or no one else does. Now, sometimes that can create a point of connection because what you're reading, you may realize, oh, actually someone else cared about it. Right. And you feel a connection with somebody from the past. But at the same time, I think that that for me is what's comforting about being a historian, is finding something that you just can, you think about dissertation work or things like that you find something so compelling that you're just going to continue to care about it even if nobody else does. And the discipline, I think, rewards that. That's a good thing to do.
Well, and I think it also plays into the notion of a Christian calling. Part of the reason why you take up the tragedy is because you do have hope.
That's right.
That you can be part in some teeny tiny way even of the redemptive process.
Right. And part of the redemptive process is, I think, just acknowledging that something needs to be remembered. Even if nothing's going to change, I think that's a big part of it, is that it's honoring that it happened.
Yeah.